all the way down to get it.
All right, you ready? You guys ready?
Mm-hmm.
This is brakes test 5.
No, Webb's here.
Webb's out there pulling that F-150 into the shop. The two basic types of brake power boosters are vacuum assisted and electronic assisted.
Sure.
Have you ever seen an electronic assisted brake booster?
No, but I'm just sure they got them.
I don't know.
How does one?
I don't know.
How do you get vacuum to support a hybrid?
Good question.
When it's just electrical motor?
Well, you got a hybrid's got a gasoline engine.
Yeah, but when it's not running, it's just electrical. How's the brake assisted?
Wow. That's a pretty good question, isn't it?
Does it somehow manage vacuum with some kind of pump?
No, actually, on those, basically there's a lot of stuff that's electric on those. They got electric steering, and that kind of thing. And also the ABS pump, how it jacks up the pressure and all. And like sometimes the ABS pump on Ford Escapes will apply the brakes independently of, whatever and all that. But I'll tell you what. Let me see. I've got a little book right here that I'm going to let you look through. And right here from the Automotive Career Development Center. All right, it's got the answer to your question in it. Now, since you asked that question, I'm going to let you dig it out of this book and share it with the rest of us. That's something that you can teach the rest of us. You ought to be able to find that, okay?
I'm illiterate.
All right, that's pretty good. Now then,
So the answer to that question.
the answer to that question is typically the answer that this test writer wanted was false because they're hydraulically controlled brakes, and then there are vacuum. Like the ones if there's not enough room in the engine compartment for a brake booster, and the brake booster's got to be pretty big because it's dependent on square inches. You got me? And obviously, if the bigger your brake booster is, the more square inches you got. And if it needs atmospheric pressure to act on the back of that diaphragm and help you with your assist, it's going to have to be a pretty big diaphragm. Well, if there's no room in the engine compartment or there's no vacuum being created like on a diesel, you know what I mean? Now, some diesels had a little vacuum pump that was just for this. That would actually use the vacuum would create vacuum with a little pump with a diaphragm in it for the brake booster. But most of the ones that you're seeing are going to have a hydraulic that's driven off the power steering. They'll have power steering lines going up to it. And it's a funky little thing, right there. So, anyway, that was the falsity there. Atmospheric pressure acting on the pedal side of a booster diaphragm results in boosted pressure to the master cylinder's primary piston. Now, what you got in there, when your vacuum line is connected to the brake booster, you've actually got vacuum on both sides of that brake booster all the time. Of the diaphragm, there's a diaphragm in the middle of that brake booster, kind of like this right here. The brake booster's here, and then your pedal is coming in from the back, right? You may even see those little holes around this thing here. Pedal's coming in there, and it's hooked to a little spool valve in here, and your master cylinder is out here, and the little plunger that's actually going into the master cylinder piston is attached to this right here, to this diaphragm. Okay, so what happens, and we know without actually drawing a seriously accurate thing, when you apply that brake, you're actually opening a vent and letting atmospheric pressure come in behind this, but you still got engine vacuum on this side, right? Okay, so whenever this thing is closed up so that atmospheric pressure comes in back here and you've still got engine vacuum on this side, coming from the engine, that atmospheric pressure is going to be, it's a differential between there, and it helps you with your brake application. So you're actually letting atmospheric pressure in back here is what you're doing. And everything's vacuum until you let the atmospheric pressure in. And I had to think, in one of the first days of class, I ran through a PowerPoint that showed you the different stages of that little spool valve in here, the way it operated and all that. That is not something you even ever need to know. Basically, and the reason I'm saying that is if you're working on a vehicle and there's vacuum going to the booster and you've got no power brakes, you're going to put a booster on it. You're not going to take it apart and look at the spool valve and all that hogwash. You're just going to pull it. Maybe a rebuilt one that you get from the parts house. There's another thing I want to tell you. When you buy a power brake booster from the parts house, a lot of the time it ain't painted. It's just naked metal, steel. Okay, I do not like to put just a naked metal part on a car because as it starts to rust, it looks cruddy. Got me? And so there's no shame in taking that naked metal brake booster and putting a coat of black paint on it. Got me? Which Abby would really enjoy, painting like she is. But anyway, that's the long and the short of that.
So this one is true.
Yeah, that particular one is on the pedal side of the booster diaphragm. Number 2 is true. Number 3, brakes will no longer work after the vacuum has been used. That's false. You know good and well that you got good brakes. Jackie Woods is a big muscle-bound welding instructor that we had over here for about 20 years. His brake booster went south. And grab your brakes, test 5. Yeah.
Why'd you do that?
Yeah, we didn't get very far into it though. But
Let's do FTF on the first 3.
yeah. Yeah. All right. Hoy hoy. But anyway, Jackie was driving that little truck. The truck he drove, he had a tendency to put things off, getting them fixed for a while. Just put them off. Have you ever noticed how people have a tendency to do whatever they have to get by? Like, for instance, have you ever listened to Click and Clack, the Tappet Brothers on the radio? Well, the people call in and ask them car questions. And if you know anything about cars, you can tell these guys aren't dummies. They know what they're talking about on just about any car you call in. And I think they've got a technical guy that gives them stuff and all that. But they're funny as all get out if you ever listen to them. And I really like the guys. I like listening to them. But anyway, the point is, this one lady called in and she says it was some kind of car Volvo or something that had the ignition's key in the column in the console, and she said the only way I can get it to start or even do anything whenever I get ready is take and pour a little water down in there. And when I pour some water in there, it will start. And so I always keep some water there on the console so that whenever I get ready to start it, I can pour a little water in there and it'll fire up. This other guy called in and he says, I got on some snow and went sliding down a hill and bent the exhaust pipe on my whatever kind of car it was. And he says, and the exhaust pipe's kind of bent up here real close to the tire at a strange angle. And he said, but since that happened, the car runs better and gets better gas mileage than it ever has. He said, do I need to straighten that pipe out? I'd really rather leave it bent. There's funny people calling in, and stuff like that. But what I started to say was people will do whatever they have to get by. And if they can, people are so adaptable. If they can adapt to pouring some water in the switch every time to start it, or whatever, or anything like that. Jackie, his truck wouldn't back up. It was a little S10 pickup truck, and it got to where it wouldn't back up. Every other gear worked fine, but it wouldn't back up. And so what he would do is when he pulled into Hardee's or anywhere to park, he just had to find a place to park where he didn't have to back up. I mean, one that he didn't have the money to fix it, he just was, putting it off. And then the brake booster went bad on it, and he didn't have no power brakes, but he had a great big, cast iron leg that he could use. I mean, he was a big, strong guy. That Tough Man contest where you win $10,000 if you beat everybody else? He won it. But anyway, he knew martial arts and everything else, but he was an interesting guy. He wound up getting a PhD and went on somewhere else. But I taught welding for 20 years, and he was good at it, But anyway, the long and short of it was we put a booster on there finally for him. I ordered a booster. He never would let us put it on. I had to actually shift it from into my inventory, and whenever we finally put the new booster on it and shifted it back out of the inventory and let him pay for it, I says, now, Jackie, you have power brakes now. You don't need to stand on the brake so hard. And he took off, and the first time I heard him stop, he went, because he was used to mashing the brake so hard to stop. But anyway, the long and the short of it is you're still going to have brakes, and you'll still have steering, too, in situations where your power steering goes out. Hydraulic boost is constant even if the engine is under load. If the engine's under load, is vacuum constant? No, vacuum drops when the engine's under load. But hydraulic pressure, even if the engine's under load, you're still going to have constant hydraulic pressure. You might notice going into the power brake booster, there is a check valve. There's basically a check valve there where it goes in. And that's basically so that it'll keep some vacuum trapped there. If you disconnect the if you lose your engine vacuum, you got enough vacuum stored in there for one more stop, typically. In a Power Master booster, power steering fluid can be added to the master cylinder reservoir with no ill effects. You'd never put power steering fluid in the brake reservoir because it swells up all the rubber parts and just ruins everything. All right, so the brake fluid is separate from the other. All right. Okay. Now then, let's see. When testing a hydraulic pressure storage system, finding a brake pedal that's hard to push on the first application means the accumulator is leaking. Now, there is an accumulator that's part of that system so that you will always have pressure ready for your next brake application. And the accumulator on that particular system there is going to be a sort of a can-shaped thing. It's not very big that's out there. And it's got a spring and a piston in it and all that kind of stuff. And it keeps fluid ready for that brake application so that your first one will work. Of course, it replenishes from the power steering pump. And the power steering pump puts some pretty serious pressure out. It puts up about 1,200, 1,500 pounds. And so, number 7. Incidentally, some vehicles have got hydraulic-driven cooling fans. The cooling fan, the engine cooling fan is driven by hydraulic fluid pressure from the pump. That's strange. Jaguar came out with that, and then Ford started using it on some of their Lincoln LSs and everything. They eventually got Jeep Cherokees. Some of them had it. Number 7. In order for their vacuum supply boosters to operate, vehicles with diesel engines need a separate pump for their vacuum supply, and that's basically true. Incidentally, if you ever buy a vacuum pump to put on a diesel, the pulley has to be pulled off the pump using a power steering pump pulley puller or reasonable facsimile. But on those, it's not quite as tight as it is on the power steering. Power steering pump. And so what you can do on that is drop a bolt in there, hold onto that pulley, because your old air pump is junk anyway. Your old vacuum pump, and you're putting another one there. So if they send you one without a pulley on it, you got to use your old pulley. And this guy came walking out of the parts room at the Ford place one day, and he says, "The guys in the parts room sent me out here. Can you take this pulley off of this pump and put, so I can put it on the other one?" He says, "I can put it on the new one, but I just can't take it off the old one." So I held the pulley in my hand, and I got my air hammer, dropped a bolt in there, and pushed it out. And I said, "You got an air hammer in your box at the shop?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "You can do that too." So it's not really that hard. Now, you can't do that with power steering pump pulleys because they're on there a little tighter. That one's on there the same way, but it's more of an interference fit on the power steering pump pulley. Some of those things are hard to move on power steering pumps, but that tool will usually do it. Let's see. Brake pedal ratio is a ratio of the lengths of the lever arms on the pedal assembly. That's number 8. That's true. And what we're talking about when we say ratio, anybody remember?
So, hydraulic pressure applied.
Well, ratio is like this. It's not really hydraulic. We're talking mechanical. All right, if I've got a brake pedal like that, and it's swinging on this, and it's pushing up here, right?
Amplified leverage.
Yeah. Actually, that ain't right. I drew that wrong. All right. Yeah. Let's say, so basically you're going to be swinging it up here, and you're going to be coming down that way. So when you mash it, that's going to go in. But the long and short of it is you got a long pedal, and it's a lot farther from here to here than it is from there to there. So you're amplifying that thing by about 8 times. You got me? In other words, you're amplifying everything all the way up on that, so you don't have to work on it so hard. And it's usually the way it is on clutch too. It's actually, they usually do that all the way down the line, but they got to figure everything so the travel will be right. Okay, let me see. Adding power steering fluid to the master cylinder brake reservoir cylinder is very dangerous and mistake that can lead to total brake failure. Yes, except it doesn't cause the brakes to fail. What it does is it causes them all to lock up. And what happens is if you ever see a situation like that where somebody has put power steering fluid or motor oil or something in the brake fluid reservoir, it swells up all the rubber parts. But when you mash the brake, you're actually pushing rubber past them, but it can't return. And then the brake pedal gets really, really hard, and the car is just kind of just locked down, and it goes over beside the road, and you just can't drive it. It's just sitting there. You know what I mean? Now, you're not talking about in most. I don't know if I've ever heard of one where the brake pedal just went to the floor and they lost their brakes, but you have to rebuild the entire system that way, and it's like if you get it done at a dealership or something, it's going to be like $4,000 or something. It's ridiculous how much money it is to replace all that stuff. It's messed up. And occasionally that kind of thing happens, somebody that's not paying attention to what they're doing, and I tell you something else too. If you're working with somebody that's younger, and this is something I have to do as an instructor all the time, I got to recognize the fact that a lot of the stuff that I've known all my life, other people are just learning. Not the least of which is the fact that the lug nuts don't go on with the tapered side out. You understand what I'm saying? The lug nuts go on with the tapered side in, not out. And I've actually came behind somebody that rotated tires and saw that they put them on backwards, and I thought this person knew better than that. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about? The tapered side of those lug nuts, they don't go out, they go in. And I've seen students take young kids that would just do exercises for recruiting day, they'd spin those things off, they would put the tires back on, pull it off, and immediately, having just taken those lugs off, they put them on backwards. And I just don't get it. I mean, why in the world? I don't remember a time when I didn't know that. I mean, I honestly don't, I mean, as long as I've known what a wrench was. But anyway, let's see. The power piston is the interface between the front push rod and the master cylinder. That's number 10, and that's false. That's not right. And I don't, like I say, a lot of this terminology is not even a big deal. A lot of people that work on cars every day probably wouldn't know the answer to some of these questions just because they don't use the terms. I mean, they can fix a car as good as anybody, but you don't have to know all the terms just perfectly. A tandem diaphragm vacuum booster has one diaphragm instead of two. It actually has two instead of one. And then now, let's go on up here. Number 12, power boosters. Where are power boosters mounted?
On the outside and the hood.
Yeah, between the brake pedal and the lever and the master cylinder. That's a C. That's basically a C. All right. Okay, now then, let's see. Number 13, to multiply the force coming from the brake pedal, vacuum boosters rely on what? What do they rely on? A pressure differential across the diaphragm. That's what I just drawed for you on board up there, y'all. An undesirable hissing noise caused by air rushing into the chambers of a vacuum booster is prevented by means of a what? A little filter. If you look at the back of the brake booster where that pedal goes in, you're going to see, where this rod goes into that thing, you're going to see a sort of an accordion thing here, and you're going to see some holes like that, and you'll see some foamy stuff through those holes. And that actually is stopping that noise from being there. Something else, too, if you actually mash the brakes and you feel the engine start to skip, you'll know you've got some leaking diaphragm issues going on there, too. An undesirable hissing, never mind, I've already read that question. Let me flip back here. You guys saw the page that was right behind the one that shows your worksheets and all? Everybody see that? Okay, keep that in mind. All right, that's important. That's exactly part of how you got your midterm grade. And some of you may be getting notifications because of that. All of the following are advantages of a tandem diaphragm, except, and this is an ASE style question, the doubling of surface area provides improved gas mileage. That's a bunch of hooey. All right, that was D. D is the one there. What it does have for advantages is the doubling of surface area gives more boost. The same boost can be achieved with a smaller diameter booster housing. More boost can be achieved through booster housing of the same size. 16, to prevent fluctuating manifold pressure from affecting the amount of vacuum available to the booster, vacuum is stored in a what?
Accumulator.
Stored in an accumulator. What do you think, guys? Everybody like that answer? How about a reservoir? Have anybody ever opened the hood of an older vehicle and saw something under that looked like a high-C fruit juice can that was painted black? That's a vacuum reservoir, is all it is. It's a cheap vacuum reservoir. It's got a little valve in it. But, basically, sometimes they'll have a big vacuum reservoir that stores it. Anytime you see a vacuum reservoir, it's for muscle vacuum. It's for vacuum that's needed whenever you're heavy into the throttle. If you're heavy into the throttle and you've had to make a brake application for whatever reason, that sounds kind of extreme, but and you wind up being heavy into the throttle so that it can't replenish, you might not have power brakes the next time. But anyway, always remember that vacuum is low when load is high. That's used by the engine controller to determine vehicle load and all kinds of things, and also transmissions, that use vacuum use that principle too. Let's see, in a hydraulic booster, boost pressure is obtained from what? Throttle body, the diaphragm, the oil pump, power steering pump. We talked about that earlier. Power steering pump. You got hydraulics available there. You may as well use them. To isolate the cause of vacuum not being stored in a vacuum reservoir, inspect all of the following except for what? Spool valve for sticking. You're not going to see that. I mean, that's not going to cause it not to store vacuum in the reservoir. What if you had a reservoir that wasn't storing vacuum? You know, and how do you wire that up? I mean, how do you do that? You got a reservoir here, got a big old reservoir that's storing vacuum, and you got a line coming by that's feeding vacuum. All right, you're going to come off, and you're going to go over here. There's got to be a check valve somewhere, doesn't there? Got me? There's got to be a check valve so it can deliver vacuum without actually losing. If you're deep into the throttle, you don't want this losing its vacuum, so you're going to have a check valve. On your AC systems, you've actually got, coming from vacuum, you've got there's a little diaphragm here, sort of a check valve thing. I'll say a diaphragm, it's a little thing. And then coming out here, you'll have one of these like that. Okay, and so what that does is when this vacuum goes away and there's air pressure here, the vacuum here is trapped. On the air conditioner systems, and that's a little bitty thing. The Oldsmobile's got one. The Crown Victoria's got one. The Broncos got one. They all do that. But I mean, in similar fashion, they'll either have it there or they'll have it built into the reservoir, too. You know, they'll have it out there where the vacuum goes into the reservoir, and it'll be like that. Okay, let me see. Which of the following steps is done first when testing a vacuum booster operation? Testing vacuum booster operation. How would you be able to tell if you had a bad or a good booster? Let's say that you were going to verify that the booster was actually working right. What do you feel when you're pumping brakes? Like if you're bleeding brakes and you're out there and you ain't got the car started, the pedal is always really hard and really high, and then sometimes when you start the car it goes way low, right? And then you got to bleed it some more.
Pedal blade?
Yeah, basically, I'm going to put my foot on the gas pedal. I mean, not on the gas pedal, on the brake pedal, and then I'm going to start it up, and I'm going to see if it goes down. Now, it still should feel good and firm. It shouldn't go all the way to the floor, but it's actually going to go down some when you when you crank it up. If you crank it up and it doesn't go down, where you got to remember, you need to pump it to make sure you've dumped all of the vacuum from left over from the last time the engine ran. Put your foot on it, crank it up, and if it goes down, you know the booster's good. If you crank it up and it don't go down, you need to make sure there's vacuum being delivered, because somebody may have left a line and hooked it to a manifold or something. They use a big old 3/8 rubber hose to carry vacuum up there because they need a lot of volume for that.
So that would be A?
That would be, let's see, 19. What do they on theirs they wanted you to turn the engine off first. You turn the engine off first, and then you're going to apply and replace the brake pedal. The pressure gets hard to push. You're going to evaluate the amount of movement, then you're going to press down on the brake pedal and start the engine, in that order. That's how you're going to do it. Which one of the following steps is done last? Whenever you press down the brake pedal and start the engine. That's what you're going to do there. And then, you watch it move like that. Okay. So everybody, incidentally, I was telling y'all too that for the